In corporate news, MTN announced this week that it's planning to float round 2 of another 200 billion naira bond, as well as clarifications on some of its regulatory filings, such as tax payments to the Nigerian authorities. Unpacking Nigeria's business week in markets. For me on the show tonight is licensed dealer and CEO at Carry Asset Management, Johnson Chukwu. Good evening to you. Thanks for connecting to us. We've got a lot to cover over the next 30 minutes or so. So let's get ground running. On the fiscal side, is Nigeria already insolvent or heading in that direction, going by the latest figures on revenue and debt servicing?
Well, I wouldn't say we're insolvent because insolvency simply means that you've gotten so bad that your assets can no longer pay your liabilities. But what I would say, we are in very difficult financial situation. We still have underlying assets. We still have our oil wells. We have our gas fields. We have our agricultural land. We have our human capital, which should actually be our most critical and most important resource. But we have pushed ourselves to the point where our financial conditions are such that we are illiquid. We have liquidity issues. We have serious financial challenges. A situation where your total revenue in the first 4 months of this year is not enough to cover your interest payment obligations. It's actually, if it was a financial institution, your lenders would have been so worried that they will appoint an administrator to manage your affairs to be sure that they manage it to be able to ensure that you can pay your debts. But as it stands today, we are not insolvent. We have serious financial challenges. We have managed ourselves, like I said, so that our revenues are not able to meet our interest payment obligations. We still have the capacity to grow those revenues, and that must be emphasized. Today, we are producing about 1 million barrels of crude. We have, in the past, produced up to 2.2 million barrels of crude. The target, if you look at the project target for crude production now, we should be talking about 3 million barrels of crude. Even if you had limited yourself to the OPEC quota of 1.826 million barrels a day for the month of August, we would have still be fine. But unfortunately, we have managed our affairs in such a way that we're in current situation. We are not insolvent. We have serious financial challenges, which we should be able to come out of if we get it right, if we do the right things.
Okay, so that you just touched on my next question. How could the country's fiscal deficit balance be rebalanced in the short to medium term, in which we're borrowing to pay interest on debt? We've got the portfolio of debts to be paid. You are an investment and asset manager. So if you're giving this advice, what is happening right now? What do we need to do?
I will start from taking advantage of what should ordinarily be our core comparative advantage. Today, the world is looking for gas. We are one of the countries with the highest endowment of gas. We need to leverage on that immediately. And how do we do that? We need to reach out to the IOCs, international oil companies. We need to reach out to the Western countries, Western economies who are seriously and desperately looking for alternative gas supply away from Russia. And we should attract investment in the short term to fund the Trans-Sahara gas pipeline that's supposed to run from Lagos, from Niger Delta area or Nigeria to Algeria to France. We should get funding for that. We should immediately get funding for the development of the liquefied natural gas project in Brass and the one in Okoloko in Ondo State. Those 3 projects, if we focus on them, we should be able to attract maybe $20–30 billion into this economy. That could be done.
I'm going to ask very quickly, I'm going to cut in respectfully. We need to rebalance the fiscal situation. Right now, we're running upside down, as it were. You've got debt here, you've got total revenue here. So we need inflow like yesterday. So the Trans-Sahara project is not going to happen in 12 months. I'm not sure we can lay out the pipeline, get the gas on, get paid for, and we're getting those dollars. So I'm trying to find out where and how do we get solution right now to this fiscal imbalance.
Okay, the next thing we need to do, if we have to do something quickly, is go and reach some level of compromise and understanding with the people in Niger Delta to reduce the level of crude theft so that crude production will increase. I believe if we stop or minimize crude theft, we could increase crude production to maybe 1.5, 1.6 million barrels a day. If you look at the report for first 4 months of this year, the worst underperformance was in the oil and gas revenue. It was about 39% performance in oil and gas revenue. Non-oil revenue actually performed relatively well. So the greatest challenge we have is we need to go back and restore growth in oil and non-oil and oil and gas revenue. And that can only come if we can reach some understanding with those in the Niger Delta. So crude production will improve.
That so if we do 1.82 million barrels per day, if we do 1.82 million barrels per day, no one is stealing a single barrel of oil. Do you think with the subsidy still on our table, we'll still be able to have a fiscal balance? We'll still be able to balance the books?
Okay, yes, we will. And remember that current production is likely coming from offshore, deep offshore projects, where you have production sharing agreement contracts with the IOCs. And under the fiscal arrangement under production sharing contracts in the deep offshore, most of the revenue go to the IOCs. Minimal revenue comes to Nigeria. If we go back to production, and production is taking place in a shallow offshore and onshore assets, Nigeria's government's fiscal arrangement so that the Nigerian government gets a huge portion of that production from those onshore and shallow offshore assets. That's one aspect. Why I didn't want to say that we just need to take our subsidy, because that's the easiest thing to talk of. But in today's world, can we reasonably take out 100% of subsidy? Probably we can have what we call staggered phase out. And that cannot happen just in the next 1 year. The simple reason that a landing cost of PMS today of about 800 naira or so, how many households can afford to pay 800 naira per liter of fuel, given our level of income? So we have waited for too long, and we are in a situation where you really can't take out 100% of the subsidy. Government should have what you may call price modulation, move price as landing costs increase or adjust, but it cannot be a one fell swoop. We could have done it 2 years ago, and Nigeria would have said, okay, when price of crude was low, we enjoyed it. Now it is high, we have to bear it. But even countries that have market-determined rates for petrol, some of them are giving handouts. Food ticket, America is giving food ticket to their citizens. Some countries are now trying some form of subsidy to support citizens to be able to afford, maintain their standard of living. So it's not a time when we can afford as a country. I am a free market advocate, but I also realize in the reality is that Nigerians can't afford the 800 naira per liter of fuel today, given our income level. We can have, like I said, modulated phase out and then adjust the price over time. And the next 2 years have that price, but hopefully in the next 2 years, prices would have come down to the point that Nigerians can afford to pay for fuel and even a landing cost.
So how much difficult do you think the fiscal space will be for Nigeria as the US dollar gets stronger, global inflation surges, interest rates are higher, the war in Ukraine is not over yet?
You know, Boston, which is why I had to dwell so much on for us to improve crude production. If we improve crude production, we are going to address many of these challenges we're having. The direct impact we're having from the Russian-Ukraine war shouldn't be, in fact, the opposite should have been the case. Ideally, for an oil-producing country like ours, like Nigeria, we should be talking of building our reserve today. We should be talking of our currency strengthening. We should be talking of low inflation rates. And ordinarily, we shouldn't go where we're going to, because where we are is a situation where countries that are that are not non-oil producing countries that are importing refined petroleum products are. Today, we have also become a net importer of refined petroleum products because we're not even producing any. What we're exporting is not even enough to buy imported refined petroleum products. So we need to address that. So that's the core of our problem. And once we address it, you're going to have, if you're producing 1.826 million barrels a day, I can tell you, we should have a creation in our reserve. If you have significant creation in your reserve, we should have strengthening of your local currency. And if you have lower exchange rates, the imported inflation we are dealing with will not be there. We'll be dealing with local inflation. The other aspect to deal with local inflation figure is the issue of insecurity in the northern part of the country that has made it difficult for farmers to go to their farms and produce. Many of the farmers are living in IDP, let's say internally displaced persons camps. If we can also address that, And these are the feet of the government to do. If we can address that, we can have food production, and Nigerians do not have so much to depend on cereals imported from Ukraine. We can produce what we eat because we have the arable land. But unfortunately, because of how we have managed our affairs, our security challenges, our social challenges, we find ourselves as a net importer of refined petroleum products, and we also not produce enough food to feed ourselves.
Just a quick, Chukwu, there's more to chat to after the break, including trading inflation and fighting interest rates. And of course, what's the investment case for NNPC IPO? I'm going to ask you those questions when we come back. Stand by, everyone. Yeah, Justin Chukwu, investment expert and CEO at Cowrie Asset Management, is drilling down Nigeria's Business and Markets Week on the show. Justin, let's continue. How much of the fiscal risk we're talking about can the steady interest rate hike by the central bank achieve, and how?
Well, unfortunately, the high interest rates that the central bank has adopted now, the contractionary policies, are not achieving much in terms of one, moderating inflation, and also has some unintended negative consequences, or we have unintended negative consequences. Let's start from the issue of moderating inflation. If you recall, central bank increased the monetary policy rate by 150 basis points in May. At that point, in May, inflation rate was about 16.9%. Subsequently, we are talking about inflation rate that increased subsequently to 17.71% and now 18.6%. So the 150 basis point increase in May has in no way stopped the rate of inflation, the increase in inflation rate. And I don't think the 100 basis point further increase in the month of July will have any effect. Simple reason is this. The pressures we are having is not driven by consumer demand. So increasing interest rates will not necessarily curtail consumer demand. It's driven by supply shortages and supply shocks. And if you don't address those supply shocks, those inputs are unfortunately items whose demand are inelastic. Demand for diesel when there is no power supply in the country, when we are seeing national grid collapsing, it's almost inelastic. Demand for food is almost inelastic. So you don't curtail such demand by increasing your cost of credit or cost of funds. Now, on the other aspect of it, the challenge I have with what the Central Bank of Nigeria and the other central banks globally, including the European Central Bank, has adopted is that we are fighting the wrong fire with the wrong equipment. The impact will be that the manufacturing sector is going to have higher cost of production. They're already having higher input costs from energy supply, energy sources, diesel for the local Nigerian manufacturers. They rely on diesel for most of their production activities. They're dealing with higher cost of diesel. Then they are going to deal with higher cost of funds. So ultimately, they will flush into their cost of production or cost of goods produced. And the impact is that they are going to land at the shop floor at higher cost, which will further exacerbate inflation pressure and which will worsen the capacity of average households to consume. So you're going to see increase in the cost of production, lower ability to sell, reduction in demand for labor, and ultimately we are pushing the global economy into recession in an attempt to fight inflation with the long tool.
Okay, so are you expecting further rate hikes in September and November meetings? And by how much?
Yes, if the Monetary Policy Committee is not just the local Nigerian Monetary Policy Committee, I've also made reference to other global central banks. If they don't have a rethink and recognize that they're using the wrong tool to fight the current inflation pressure, the emphasis should be how do we support the fiscal authorities to improve on those items whose supplies are in deficit. I have talked about how we're going to improve gas supply, how we're going to improve production of crude in the country. If we don't address those supply bottlenecks, the efforts to fight inflation will not succeed, and you're going to see a situation where the Monetary Policy Committee will keep increasing inflation interest rates until we get to a point where the economy is going to suffer a shock, because that shock will come from the fact that cost of goods produced become too expensive. Consumers are not able to afford it. Manufacturers can't produce because they can't say what they have produced. They have to shed weight and reduce their employment level, and that is a sure route to global recession. Okay. I think that is when the Monetary Policy Committee begin to rethink the approach they have adopted. I believe it's not the right approach. I've said it time and time again. But as long as they stick to believing that we are fighting inflation with increasing the benchmark rate, they will continue in that trajectory until that shock affects the economy.
Okay, Johnson Chukwu, the NNPC is heading your way. So what's your outlook on the NNPC talking about an IPO? Do we have an investment case here? If it comes straight to your table, how will you deal with it?
Yes, we have a very impressive investment case, and I will tell you why. NNPC has subsidiaries, like NNPC currently manage the highest concentration of our oil and gas assets. I've talked about the potentials of the oil and gas sector, the capability we can produce more. Interestingly, we're even seeing divestment by IOCs, which NNPC now can also bid for. In fact, they have the first option of refusal, the right of first option of refusal. So they will acquire those assets, increase their holding of oil and gas assets, and NNPC, when they come to the market, will likely be the most valuable corporate entity in the country today. And that means an investment in an IPO of NNPC will be an investment that cuts across not only the upstream segment of the oil and gas sector where they have oil wells, gas fields, we're also going to invest in the downstream. So it's going to be the only oil and gas company that is quoted that straddle the entire spectrum, the entire value chain of that industry, starting from the downstream segment where they have the retail outlets. I mean, NNPC MD said they're going to expand their retail footprint about 1,500 retail stations from about 500 for something retail stations. And they also have the NPDC, which is the oil and gas exploration and production company aspect of their business. They have NGX, the NGC, that is Nigerian Gas Company, which is a gas facility infrastructure provider, and they have huge reserve of crude and gas. So it's one logic that is no brainer that any investment in an IPO by NNPC will be a good investment.
I'm sure since Tuesday, you folks in the investment issuing houses business are already making phone calls to yourself who's going to be the lead advisor to the NNPC. You're smiling. I know you guys can smell the money. A lot of Nigerians can't see it, but I'm sure I can see it. I know. You guys can smell the money. Okay, let's leave it there for tonight. We really appreciate your time and those perspectives. Thank you so much, Johnson Chukwu, the CEO and head of dealing at Carrier Asset Management. More trading statistics and business news.